the insidious bias of race we encounter every day within the institutional structures that seek to perpetuate our oppression. Those institutions include the places where we learn, the places where we live, the places where we work and shop, and the places where we worship. As I began to recall the racist incidents of my past, the floodgate of experiences rushed forth. Wow, has there been so many? So for the interests of this session, I will share but a few. As a 12-year-old student voluntarily participating at the behest of my parents in the now infamous busing desegregation program in Boston, it is more than expected that I would experience being physically harassed and taunted with racial epithets, being called nigger, every school day of my 8th grade year in Brookline, Massachusetts. That is the look of racism so often reported in our news and vociferously protested against in marches across this country. However, the insidious bias of race more harmful to me as the, quote, smartest student in the 8th grade, as measured by my Iowa standardized test and a straight A student to boot, was not being approved to register for honors level classes for high school, although my peer and best friend, Beth Rosenthal, was able to do so as the second smartest student in the grade. With the nicety of true sincerity, our teacher and guidance counselor advised me that she believed the work would be far too rigorous for me, but in spite of her well-meaning advice, I followed my own desires. To satisfy my graduation requirement at Brookline High, I submitted my senior paper on some thesis I no longer recall regarding 18th century Black writers in England. My honors British literature teacher gave me an F on the paper, apparently based on her personal knowledge, irrespective of my bibliography, that there were no Black writers in England in 18th century. Having done this research utilizing the vast resources at Harvard Library, my stepmother, then a college professor herself, asked her teaching peers at Harvard to read and grade this paper of one of her, quote, students. They did so, returning edits and comments, but with letter grades no less than an A-. Confronted with the research sources and edits and comments from teaching professionals, my teacher relented and allowed me to pass the paper requirement with a D. Onward as an 18-year-old freshman in college and still eager to do my best, I was assured by my stepmother that the C reported on my first semester report card for physics could certainly be a registrar mistake, since all of my quizzes and tests yielded nothing less than an A. However, the insidious bias of race allowed the department chair to explain to me in person that although my professor reported all my grades as A's, he himself did not believe I could have done that well, and therefore changed them all to C's. Likewise, the president of the university offered his sympathies, but confessed he would not act against one of his tenured professors. They won. As a working professional, excited to embark on the purchase of a brand new, not yet built townhome in Northern Virginia with a bank mortgage approval in hand, it was quite unexpected to have my lot and model selection rejected by the builder on the grounds that it was the largest model and located prominently at the entrance to the community. Instead, they assured me they could approve a smaller lot and model to be built at the rear of the community near the top lot. Furthermore, at the arbitration hearing, the builders expressed additional concern regarding my mortgage approval since it included a down payment of 20%, and they were not at all sure where a young girl like me would have had the means to acquire such a sum of money. Again, the concern was delivered with the nicety of true sincerity, but the mortgage lender was there to offer full proof of my savings over the years. Really? So that represents but a few of my experiences, but yet does not speak to those that even I am unaware of. Let it suffice to say, racism is systemic and at work every day in the places where you learn, where you live, where you work and shop, and where you worship. Thank you. Jazakallah khair. May God reward you with goodness.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sister Sabrina, for this, for informing us about a lot of things that we take for granted, and most of the society does. Next, I would like to ask Art to introduce Miss Judy Hill, who is our next speaker.
Dr. Saad, I don't see Art. It looks like he dropped. So do you want to go ahead and do that?
You know, I don't have the bio of Miss Judy. Should we have Sister Ivana maybe?
No, let's, if Art is here, let me go back.
Art is here, okay.
He just joined.
All right. Well, that was exciting. We knew that today would be a learning experience, but we didn't know that the computer would crash in the middle of it. But anyhow, we're back. So thank you, Sabrina. I would like to take a moment and introduce Judy Hill. Judy retired from the Akron Public School in 2008 after 30 plus years teaching, designing curriculum, and administration. Dedicated to the Akron community, Judy has too many roles and too many awards to mention, but I can say that she is in her second term as the president of the Akron NAACP. She is a graduate of and board member of Leadership Akron. And Judy has said that her greatest honor and accomplishments are as a grandmother of 9, a mother of 4, and she has, well, 4 adult children, and she's the wife of Gregory Hill. Judy is clearly among the most qualified people in Akron to discuss racism. Let's welcome Judy Hill.
Wrong Judy. Judy Hill is J-U-D-I.
Very good, very good. Judy, we have that problem, don't we?
Yes.
It is not a common name for an African-American female, but that's okay. If anyone, I want to be in that class with you. My name is Judy Hill, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Interesting. None of us knew what the other person was going to say. And I want to talk about not my personal experiences because they frustrate me too much, but to talk about some of the myths that I think that are shared by so many people who are white that surprise me. We all know that race is a social construct that we've created in this country. It's identity based on our appearance. It is not anything that is associated with anything except looks, and it sets people apart. Some feel that they are more superior than others, and our whole country, and the young lady spoke so beautifully about it, our country is based on these racist ideas. The whole country was built on racism. The need for cheap labor, the need to take land away from the indigenous people who were here before all of us. So our country was built on that. And it's continued throughout our history. But I want to talk about some of the myths that I think that would be good as you guys continue to talk further about racism in your small groups. The first one that, and these are, every one of these are comments I've heard from my friends. I have a wide variety of friends, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm from a little town called Oberlin, Ohio, very liberal arts college town. Major stop on the Underground Railroad, just a real gem in my mind, and a great place to be from. But even with that experience of diversity, et cetera, we too had our racism, structural racism that was built within our systems. But the first one that I love to hear from my friends is racism is not my problem. It is not a problem. It's somebody else. It's not me. And I think the minute we start to say that it's someone else, then we have lost the fact that we are all a part of this systemic issues that we live in America. Either you don't say anything about racist issues that you see, you perpetuate some of those issues, or you blindly think that it doesn't exist. And all of those are problems that really are harmful to all of us. Another one, racism is about hateful actions and words. No, oh gosh, I think that would be so easy if they were all about hateful actions and words. I'm reminded of situations over and over where someone would say, oh my God, you speak so well. People have no idea how that makes one feel. I think you speak well too. I didn't think that was a criteria for us to have a conversation. Either we're going to talk or we're not. So it always is something we need to consider and think about. It isn't always about hateful actions and words. It's about some of the things that we perpetuate because that's what we've lived or we've heard, etc. Another one that I hear often is, oh, that's just about the Ku Klux Klan. They're the ones who are perpetuating racism and white supremacy. And I too, again, I disagree. If we look at the systemic racism in our country, it can't be just. It can't be just the Ku Klux Klan. It cannot just be those white supremacists. What we saw for 8 minutes and 34 seconds, he was not a KKK member. He was a person who was assigned to protect an individual. And he murdered him in front of people, in front of a camera. And we all saw it for 8 minutes and 34 seconds. That it is all of our problem, and it is not just about KKK members. Another myth that I think is very interesting is racism has to do with intentions. I disagree. I don't believe that the perpetualism that we see with the racist actions is because somebody intently is trying to hurt me or to keep me from moving forward. I think it's just a part of a system. And because of that, and I think, as I said, the young lady who spoke before me made it very, very clear. Those issues had nothing to do with someone trying to hurt her feelings. It wasn't intentional at times. And then there are times when it really was about, no, not you. So it isn't always intentional. Sometimes it's that implicit, that other stuff that is said and not said. The actions that we take or don't take, it all makes a difference. Racism is irrational. Okay, now that one has always kind of made me laugh. I think life is irrational. I think a lot of things we do is irrational. So racism, I think, is rational to someone. It makes sense to a lot of people, or it would not be prevalent. It would not be persistent. It would not continue the way that it does. And so I disagree with that as well. Racism is not something that impacts my friends of color. I think we've gone beyond people saying a lot, I have a Black friend. That, I don't know, sometimes it makes me wonder, why am I identified as your Black friend? But I also have a friend who is white who, I say there are certain people who are in my front row who say things to me and help me look at race and race issues. She said, why is it okay for you to say, oh, this is my friend, my white friend, Kathy, but I can't say you're my Black friend, Judy? I said, you know, I say that as an identifier because I'm African American and people will assume that my friend, Kathy, is Black unless I say something. But inherently, she will not have that same problem. People will not think that she has a Black friend. And so we have that dialogue often. about identifiers and how we communicate and how that happens. And she made a point one day to say to me, why isn't that racist? And I said, it's not racist because I don't own the power. Racism has to do with power and that hierarchy that is created in our society. I said, you know, if I were racist, that would be great in some sense, because then I would have a little bit more and I wouldn't have to keep reminding people that I'm human and that I do have value and that I do have worth and that I do belong, no matter where I want to live, no matter where I want to go to school. And the last one, racial discrimination is against the law. What else can we do? There's a lot we can do. I think having this dialogue today is an absolutely wonderful opportunity. I wish there were more people involved in it. That's one. I think there's so many other things. There's some readings that we could do, and there are individual things that we can do that can help us broaden our perspectives and understanding. There's a good TED Talk on racism, and it talks about 3 myths of racism. That would be great if you get a chance to watch it. I'm a retired educator, and Teaching Tolerance magazine was a great tool that I used with young people. But I could go on with other strategies and things that can be done. And I think you're going to probably talk more about them in your small group conversations. But there was something that someone sent me, and I'm hoping that you can see it and hear it. And I'm going to see if you can hear it. I'm going to turn it up.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our Black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our Black citizens do in this society, please stand. You didn't understand the directions. If you white folks want to be treated the way Blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
I don't know if you could hear it.
Yes, we did.
Thank you. It says a lot. And it says actually more than I could say. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy, for highlighting some of the subtleties of racism and educating the group. I think the numbers are increasing, so hopefully, I think we increased from 24 to now to 46. So hopefully, we'll have more and more people join us. Our next speaker is Sister Ivana Zaygovska. I'm sorry, Sister Ivana. My name gets chewed all the time, so I know how you feel. She holds a BA in secondary education and an MA in youth development. She has been involved with different initiatives that promote positive change for society's most vulnerable populations for many years, and is the co-founder of the Medina Project, a local effort to support positive spiritual, social, and emotional development. Currently, she works as a youth and programming development manager for the Muslim youth of North America. Without further ado, Sister Ivana, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon you all. I hope you can all hear me. Yes? Okay. After the first 2 ladies that went before me, I feel so much has already been said. So I'm going to try to keep my message a little bit more brief, and just to keep it, with the message that I intentionally it came to deliver, I feel like because this is the Muslim-Jewish dialogue, I wanted to kind of tie my comments back to our faith. And as people of faith, we have many religious traditions that speak about against injustices that we discussed earlier. Muslims, and I'm sure probably Jews, also have these quotes that are catchy quotes that we like to tweet and loudly and proudly quote. One of those for us is the last speech that was given by the Prophet Muhammad that says, "O people, your Lord is one and your father is one," meaning Adam. An Arab has no superiority over non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over Arabs. Also, white has no superiority over black, nor black over white, except by piety and righteousness. All humans are from Adam, and Adam is from dust. So this is something the Prophet Muhammad says, but I believe that there's a difference between having truth and actually living truth. Those are two separate things. So yes, it's prohibited as Muslims to be racist. We know that our value comes from our righteousness and not the skin color. But when has something being prohibited has actually stopped people from doing it? Keyword being prohibition. So just because something is prohibited doesn't mean it isn't happening. Yes, racism is prohibited, but so is backbiting, so is lying, so is stealing. And you have Muslims, I'm sure Jews, you have every kind of people who are backbiting, lying, and stealing. I believe that racism is spiritual disease, and if it's left unaddressed, it will come out when we least expect it. And we have the example of Amy Cooper, a white woman, a liberal, who felt so comfortable in her own privilege that she did what she did in the park. And that's because I'm going to speak to the white people in the crowd as a white woman. As white people, we have not done a good job of holding ourselves accountable or each other accountable for when we misstep in such ways, because a lot of times racism results in arrogance. And the story in our tradition is of the creation of Adam. So this is the Muslim tradition. This is a good example of how racism results in arrogance. And obviously we cannot tell the story of Adam without telling the story of Iblis, which is the Muslim name of Satan. According to the Muslim theology, he was not a fallen angel. There's just a little difference that I want to point out. He was not considered as a fallen angel, but a jinn. And jinn are a different creation of God, like angels are. But jinn were created from fire, and angels were created from light. So Adam is created in the story, and God asks the angels to prostrate to him. And the verse says, they all prostrated except Iblis, which is Satan. Now, again, reminder, was Iblis an angel? He was not. He was a jinn. But because of the amount that he worshipped, according to this story, because of how good of a Muslim, a person who submitted, he was hanging out with the angels. So Iblis had a choice, because jinn were creatures created with a choice. Meanwhile, angels do not have choice. They're just created to worship. So he had a choice, and he chose to be pious. But why did he not prostrate? The verse goes on to say, he said, you created me from fire, and you created him from clay. This was his reason. I am better than him because I'm created from this, and you created him from that. And we know that was the wrong answer, because what could he have said? Oh God, you told the angels to prostrate. I'm not an angel. That would have been right. That would have been the right answer. But in his arrogance, this arrogance blinded him, and he forgot all logic, and he forgot all truth. And a lot of times when we're faced with our own mistakes sometimes, or when certain shortcomings are pointed out to us, we have to be careful not to become arrogant and blinded and not to see truth. So his logic was gone. Now looking back at the story of Adam, where he he does what he's specifically told not to do. Do not get near to this tree. He does that. Adam commits a sin, but his response was repentance. And when Satan committed a sin, his response was arrogance. And it all started from, I am better than him because you created him from X and you created me from Y. Who determined that fire was greater than clay or clay was greater than fire? It was just his own notion. So as people of faith, I believe it's our job to engage in this discussion honestly and fully. It is our job to identify those places where our people fall short. And our people, it could be me as Muslim, I can hold our Muslim crowd accountable, our people being Jews, our people being white people, whatever group you feel that you belong to, it is our job to hold those people accountable when they fall short of the ideals that our religion teaches, and with wisdom, obviously, and kindness at first. We must recognize that it is not just those people over there who have the problem and we're fine. If you can, I would urge you to consider taking Harvard's short implicit bias test on race and be honest with yourself and reflect on your biases. Where do they come from? How do they manifest themselves? Because holding implicit biases does not make people automatically bad. A person can be a good person and still hold some ideas that can be harmful to others. But if left unexplored, implicit biases can manifest in racism, especially if you hold power. And regardless of how well-meaning our talks on race and racism are, if we don't start from the self, it's very, very difficult to actually bring about change. So we all hold certain prejudices and implicit biases, but when pointed out, let's remember again, not to be like Satan and become arrogant, but to be like Adam and try to seek to improve ourselves. God commanded the believers in the Quran, O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses of God, even if it be against yourselves or your parents or relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, God is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed God is ever with you, what you do acquainted. So as Muslims and Jews in America as minorities, for some of us as immigrants, as an immigrant minority, we need to come to this conversation about race and racism with humility and recognize that it's a blessing from God that our journey into this country was not the journey of Black people into this country. It takes certain humility to be able to recognize that yes, as immigrants, we have certain challenges. Yes, as Muslims and Jews, we have certain challenges, but they are not the same challenges. There's generational trauma that other people are bringing, and the way that even our journey into this country is quite different. So for some of us who are white or white adjacent, meaning, you have certain privileges, we straddle almost two identities. One that is privileged in society and one that is not, which often leads us to somehow start believing that we're above the concept of race or that we no longer experience white privilege. And those of us who enjoy that type of privilege, it's our job to learn about and fully understand it and then become really uncomfortable with it in our plight to bring about equality to Black people, and not just here in our little circle, not just in our congregations or our city, state, country, but in the world. So the more ideologies and value systems, in my opinion, emphasize our differences from people whose customs and beliefs are different than our own, the more likely it is that they will encourage for us to lack empathy for them. We will tend to perceive such people as other, as somehow less than fully human, because all identity, if you think about it, that's what it does. It draws a boundary around who you are, and people who are not there they're not you. Right? And without the people who are out there, there is no in crowd. And that's how the power structure works. That's, that this is how you gain and perpetuate power. So when we dehumanize others, we are no longer capable to empathize with them. And all living creatures, if you think about it, the most basic spiritual level, are essentially manifestations of one being, one reality, and therefore the entire cosmos is in essence one and the same thing, a reflection of the divine. So one who experiences this type of unity, it will bring about a change in a way that you're able to embrace all humanity and all living things, and have utmost feeling of empathy for them. And so as people of faith, it's our responsibility to first advise, but also call out our leaders who might be preaching and or practicing injustice, intolerance, and racism. No one gets a free pass. We know what that type of racism leads to. We've seen it time and time again. Systemic racism, gross violations of human rights. It's happened in the past, it's happening currently. When there are political agendas at play, division is the tool that people in power use to distract us, because if they say, hey, your problem is not me, your problem is this other person who looks differently than you, and if you solve that, you would solve the inequality, we get distracted, and it's very easy to divide us. So we cannot be, when we start having these conversations about race and racism in America, as people who also belong to the human family, we cannot be against oppression and systemic racism in America, but support it overseas. When wrong is wrong is wrong, no matter who does it, and no matter who it's against. As Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And Muslims are taught that whoever of you sees a wrong, he should change it with his hand. So that's action. That's the first call. And if he cannot do that, he should change it with his tongue, meaning speak out against it. And if he cannot do that, he should change it, and he should hate it in his heart, but that is the weakest of faith. And oftentimes when we think about activism, we think the other way around. Oh, but I hate it in my heart, that means I'm a good person. But that's the last level, right? And in the Quran, it's belief is always paired with action. So those who believe and do righteous deeds. Every single verse that talks about the believers, it always talks about those who believe and do good deeds. So it's important, I think, for us to recognize, I just learned this, actually I heard someone say this, that history is not just stuff that happens by accident. In America, we are where we are as product of history that our ancestors chose if we are white, and did not choose if we are Black. And I wanted to close with one verse of the Quran, which I feel like is the point of it all, and where I would like us to start. And it says, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and female, and made you into nations and tribes that you may know each other." So the whole purpose of us being different was for what? So that we may know each other. So I believe that after our self-exploration and self-education, the key is to break down those walls that we've built around the other or ourselves. And the goal is not to claim that we don't see color, because that perpetuates racism and erases the contributions and experiences of Black people, but to celebrate all differences, for we don't have to be the same to be valued the same. So as people of faith, hoping to be true allies, we need to tirelessly keep acting in whatever our capacity might be. It might be speaking at a rally, it might be walking, it might be protesting, educating, donating, raising money, whatever it is that you feel that you can do, whatever God-given talents you have, we have to keep doing that. It's not a one-time event. It's not a checkbox that we can, check that we've walked with the protesters and I'm done for a lifetime. It is, we have to keep doing this day in and day out until Black people are actually safe and equal, not just here, but everywhere. And honestly, until then, I think it is our job to keep doing what we can so that Black people don't have to, so that Black people can actually mourn the losses. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Ivana. And I thank all the three speakers that enlightened all of us this evening, and I think this can set the stage for a robust discussion among each of the groups. I would like to see if where is Art? Art keeps moving in the screen. I think he's getting his 10,000 steps today. Let me see. Oh, okay, here he is. All right. So I would like to see if maybe Art can get us going into the Zoom breakout room discussion. We have those 6 questions, and it looks like we have 45 participants so far. So about 7 or 8 people per table, hopefully, would do the job. Yeah, but I'll have Art, who is much more organized, to get us going with that.
Thank you. And I'd also like to thank all of our speakers tonight for really putting us in the right frame of mind for our discussion. So in a minute, we're going to be in the breakout rooms, and it will take about a minute to get there from a technology standpoint. We will be in there for 30 minutes. There will be a 2-minute warning at the end. And then we will be having our discussion. Afterwards, we're going to ask one person from each group to be the spokesperson for that group, and then come back and report to our large session. I believe it is now time to make that move. So don't be surprised if it takes a minute to get there, but you will find yourself in a breakout room shortly.
Hey, Art, let me make a couple of quick points here. As far as the breakout rooms are concerned, first of all, we've got the questions up here on the screen, and we will post these questions on in the chat window. Do you want to talk about what questions each group wants to take, or did I miss that part?
No, thank you. I did skip that. So we should have, each table should choose one of the questions, and that's going to be the question that they will report about afterwards. And if time permits and you want to go through more questions, that's fine. But each table should pick one of the questions for reporting. And then we will do that at the end.
Okay, excellent. What we'll do is, as Art mentioned, we will go ahead and set up the breakout rooms. It can be done automatically or manually. We'll let Zoom group 8 individuals per room, but we'll have to take a look at the list and move some people around so that we don't have everybody from the same community in one room. The other thing is that we're going to go ahead and unmute everybody. So since you'll need the ability to talk, I'm sure, when you're in the breakout room. So we're going to allow participants to unmute themselves where you're in the breakout room, but I'm hoping that when we have the participants in a breakout room, that we obviously allow others to speak and mute ourselves as needed. And we will set the timer up for 30 minutes. And then once those 30 minutes are over, as Art mentioned, that everybody will merge back into the main room. One of the things, Art, I think we're going to have to do is to decide on, I'm clicking on the breakout rooms now. We said 6 rooms, correct? Yeah. Okay. So looks like the composition looks good. Okay. Breakout room 1. Now the thing is that they are all named as breakout room 1, 2, and 3. So for ease of identification, what we're going to do is we're going to give them some meaningful names here. So in room number 1, we have Mike, the co-president of TI. So we're going to call that Mike. Is that okay, Mike? I hope it's okay. And breakout room 2, we have, let's say here, Sister Lydia is in that room. So we're going to call that Lydia. And breakout room 3, that's going to be you, Art. And let's see who else is there. We can use, yeah, let's give it your name, Art. Now that doesn't mean that these individuals are going to be necessarily the speaking on behalf of that group. It just means that it'll be an easy to remember here. Last group number 4, we're going to name that Ron is in that group, so we're going to call it Group Ron. And group 5, let's see, we have Sahar in that room, so we're going to call that room Sahar. And then let's see, last but not least, room number 6. Okay, who is this other person? Okay, we're going to call Ted is in that room, so we'll call that room Ted. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of options, we're going to give it 30 minutes, Art, right? Okay, and we're going to give you 2 minutes of. So it'll be a 2-minute timer. You'll be reminded that the room will end in 2 minutes. Okay, and there you go.
African American man because he was best qualified for a position, but then ended up receiving a lot of pushback from other people about that. Other people had similar stories to that, being in a group where they were treated one way, being white, but watched the effect of somebody else who wasn't, just the difference of treatment. We also talked about how, people within our society, that there are other groups and times that still come under racist acts, but one of the advantages is if you look like the majority culture, not everybody has to know identifying qualities about you that they might judge. But if you're Black or brown and you stick out and you're obvious, that our country on sight unfortunately passes judgment that you aren't able to avoid. And then I also just shared subtle ways that I see it currently and all the time, where I watch people in my context as a teacher pass judgment or maybe make a quick judgment about a parent or how a parent might interact because of where they live or what they look like, but they wouldn't have the same response if they were talking about a white student. So we just kind of talked about how we see that still a part of our society in the past and currently. Also citing that other cultures and other societies also have their own issues that divide. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall who the name was on the second group.
Oh,
Lydia.
that was me. That was me.
That's us. This is Bruce. I'm going to give the report. So we chose the question, is our society ready to eliminate racism? How might your faith-based organization help in eliminating racism on an individual level and on a structural / policy and norms level? So for a good chunk of our time, we spent a lot of time talking about how the president has kind of made racism normalized, racism, name calling, and before this it was, and anybody in our group please correct me if I'm missing something, but before this racism was more covert and now it's more overt. Years ago you could hire somebody or do something to somebody and just have a different excuse, and now even though the laws are still on the side of the minorities, you can still be covert, but you're really being more overt. And I think, and so we kind of felt as a whole that the president has normalized this type of behavior. And one of our members said that if he is elected again, then that would be more of an affirmation of what he has done and how racism has become a normalized part of our society. So that was kind of the first part of it. So, how do we help and how do we educate? Dr. Hawk said that this is more of an opportunity for us to say, what can I do? It's not just walking with others, but to close the gaps with others. And so how do we do that? The first part is acknowledge that everyone is inherently biased and possibly racist to one degree or another. And then, so how do we make that work? And I think in what I said at some point was between the what I call the Jewish Muslim Jewish dialogue series. I think oftentimes when I've been participating, it really comes down to education, and it comes down to normalizing who you know, and then it's less of a biased racist problem. And so it's, having friends who are multiracial. So I think that's a big part of it. And so how do we do that in faith-based organizations? Well, obviously we have to educate our members of the community about racism and how we can help people to realize what it is and how we can change ourselves in our communities. Temple participates in the Interfaith Justice Series with 3 other churches in town. And we come together in the spring, and oftentimes that's the dialogue. We have a topic that someone speaks on at night, and we share a dinner together, much like what we do with the Muslim-Jewish dialogue. And it really comes down to education and getting to know other people from other groups so that it's a normalized thing. It's just, I would say that most of us who are participating in these things, so we're somewhat preaching to the choir. But and the last thing I'll say was, Dr. Hawk, you said this, is we need to become more uncomfortable to make a change.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Thank you, Bruce.
Amen. Amen. Thank you.
And our third group.
Art, that's you.
Yes, thank you. All right. Susan?
Okay, so I'm going to give the report for our group, and I tried to take notes, but honestly, the conversation was so engaging, I'm not sure if I captured everything in my notes because I was listening so much. And we chose our question, and wasn't it question 6?
Yes.
And it had to deal with how our faith-based organizations and communities can influence change. Is that a good summary?
Yeah.
Okay. So we did agree that as faith-based, we do have the power of community, that community together is a very impactful way to foster change because we have similarities within and between our groups, and by working together, we can begin to foster change. We talked about our groups as being loving and safe places for dialogues. We had an interesting conversation about Jewish spaces that are predominantly white, whereas Muslim spaces can be more multicultural. And our group member who spoke talked about instances where she has friends of color who are Muslim, but reported that they did not always feel like they had a safe Muslim faith community and had to search until they found the community that they felt most comfortable with. We said our communities come from a place of compassion. We can be open and curious. And then we talked a little bit about, so how do we go about doing this? And I think Connie was so insightful when she said we first have to look in the mirror and look within ourselves on how we show justice. Because until we can look in the mirror, see that reflection, it's very difficult to extend that into our various communities. We talked about this as being a watershed moment and a movement that is more likely to influence change. The importance of dialogue versus debate. The importance of leading by example, by creating spaces for inclusion and diversity, and that to be able to use the power of our community to push for change. And that we cannot avoid difficult conversations, that although these conversations are somewhat safe within our Muslim, Jewish, Muslim group or our interfaith groups, that we really have to be prepared to recognize and move into our other communities, whether they're They are our geographic neighborhood communities, the communities in which we work, where we're interacting with folks who may not necessarily be part of our faith-based community. I thought it was a great discussion, and it went very fast, and I think we could have talked for twice as long.
Thank you, Susie. And now the fourth group.
That will be me. It was Ron, so it was either me or Ron Weiner, but
Okay.
they selected me to do it. We did number 4. We did question number 4 also. And Bruce, thank you very much for doing most of my work. I appreciate that. But we also came to some conclusions that we cannot rid ourselves of racism overnight. It's going to be a long, long tard. We may not see it in our generation. We may not see it in the next generation. It's going to take a long time. We need to learn not to see the individual, not the color of that individual. We need to be able to be comfortable in our own skin and to help other people integrate within our group and within the Black community. We talked about racism is an interpersonal problem. That Bruce said we are all have a little bit of prejudice in us, and that we have to work to deal with that per se. And again, the comment, it's overt rather than covert, is a very, very good comment. We did not make any comments about what's going on in the presidency. That could have taken us 2 hours to do. But, we came up pretty much with the same things that Bruce and his group came up with.
Thank you, Ron. And the 5th group. That's Sahar? Okay.
Yep, that's me. So when we first started off, we were kind of confused about what question to talk about, and we kind of focused in on question 4, but then realized that we needed to ask ourselves a different question, and that was on how do we handle issues of racism within our own faith-based communities, because we can talk about outside, but what about working inwards? And we understood that the idea of changing attitudes is hard. It's very difficult because these are biases that are instilled in us from a young age, from our community and from our elders. And so the point is, the youth are what we need to work on. The youth are the next generation. The youth. They are what is important, and we need to invest in them. Working on creating our communities to be a nurturing and conducive environment to educate and expose our youth. I remember, this is like my own personal little thing, but I currently go to Kent State University, and I like to jokingly tell people that when I first came to Kent, I met white people, because I never really grew up around white people. I grew up within my own community with Arabs and Indians and Pakistanis, and so that was my first exposure to so many different cultures and so many different philosophies and beliefs. And if we were to try to work on exposing people at a younger age to different ideas and philosophies, we would create a much healthier environment for people. And we talked about how it's important to not only work on our own education, internally, but also to work on implementing change on a larger scale. So while it is important for change to be on a micro level, it is also important for it to be moving on a macro level. And so I think I summed it up. If I missed anything, that's Brother Sad's fault. He put me on the spot. But also I do want to add that one of our group members, Valerie, she's her microphone wasn't working, so she couldn't really talk, but she's so sweet. And she did mention that how by attending the JM dialogue, she was able to change a lot of her own beliefs when it comes to her own biases, and she was able to deal with that. And I thought that was really sweet and beautiful. And yeah, that's all I have to add.
Great. Thank you. And now group 6.
So that would be me, I think.
Okay.
So we actually talked about some really deep stuff in our discussion, and we started by sharing experiences that we have all encountered. Starting with Sister Ivana, she mentioned how being a white woman, she has enjoyed a difference in treatment throughout her life, and when she converted to Islam, she immediately noticed a difference. People started viewing her not as white but as Muslim. And these different experiences have been shared, such as from Brother Abdul Qadir, Brother Masood, how at the airport they have been held back for no reason other than the color of their skin. And I think that we have also discussed how being of a certain color can afford you many privileges, as opposed to being brown or black. And I also shared one or two of my experiences. Being young, I don't have that much experience, but I remember getting a D for a paper that I think deserved more than that. And it was either implicit bias from my physics professor, or he just didn't like Neil deGrasse Tyson, which was one of my sources. So that'll be a mystery forever. Anyway, we all kind of agreed upon the fact that regardless of your skin tone, regardless of your ethnicity, the fact of the matter is that a life is a life. And I'm going to piggyback on my older sister here. I also looked in on the Muslim community, and we also have to look introspectively on all of our respective communities, because there is implicit racism in a lot of our social circles, and we don't like to consider it as often. But yeah, the youth is very important as well. We need to take care of that. And I think that's really, I'm not doing justice to the depth of our conversation, but the fact of the matter is things went really well. Again, to summarize, we all have shared our experiences. We talked about question number 1, and we talked about our individual communities. We also talked about the difference between racism in America and racism in other countries. And there was a little bit of differing points of view there. And I think at the end of the day, that was still great for our overall discussion. So yeah, that's basically all I had to add.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, we've come to the end of the session, and I think we accomplished a lot. This is our first time on Zoom for this group, and we learned a few things. We're going to basically continue the same format going forward, except for next time. And next time we hopefully will hear, and this is the third try with Dr. Mir talking about current events in the Kashmir. He was going to talk the end of March, I believe, but because of the virus, we put it off until tonight. And because we changed the topic tonight, our next session will be August 13th. And I hope that Dr. Mir will remain healthy and be with us for that. Then that was August 13th. October 8th, we'll be talking about the election system. And November 12th, religion and the environment. We'll get this information out in emails to everybody. But again, I thank everybody for coming, for being here. And I'd now like to ask Rabbi Michael Ross to give the benediction. Rabbi.
Shalom Aleichem, everyone. This week, the Hebrew Bible reading is called Bahalotcha. This is where Moses his brother Aaron will, as the high priest, light the eternal light in their Tamid. And so one of the questions we begin to think is, how can we bring more light in the darkness of these days? And there's also a teaching that Aaron is the one who pursues justice. He will go beyond himself to make sure justice is sought when it gets run amok. And so the question I'm asking myself tonight for us is, how can we be more like Aaron? How can we bring more light? How can we pursue justice? What we have been developing here in these dialogue sessions is a spiritual practice that we can start bringing out to the wider world, a resource of seeking curiosity and hearing the story of someone we don't know and listening carefully to how that person is sharing that story. Can we take some of the tools of dialogue and bring it out to the wider world? Can we move from debate to dialogue and allow that kind of invitation to hear the story be present in our work? And can we pursue justice? Can we allow our spiritual practices and our wisdom traditions to guide us as we seek justice during these crazy times? So I give us a threefold blessing. May we bring this dialogue aspect of our life, this spiritual practice, out to our friends and family, and find new folks to bring to dialogue and invite them into this practice. May we pursue justice as we light our lamps. And may we all know that we are all created in the image of God. And let us all say amen. Amen.
Everyone stay safe.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. This is one of the most powerful sessions I've attended. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brother Fahim, for conducting this from the background.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.